Ale to jest bardzo trudne, jednocześnie słysząc się z opóźnieniem, to wraca do mnie.
No tak, znaczy jedyne co można sobie ściszyć, wiesz? Bo ty nas właściwie nie musisz słuchać, jak mówisz.
A, zgadza się.
Ale to spoko. No, wielkie dzięki, Miłosz. Czy są jakieś pytania, proszę Państwa? Znaczy mamy kontakt z Miłoszem online, jest dostępny też na Facebooku. Myślę, że będą takie bardzo określone wyniki tych warsztatów. Jest pytanie.
Ja tylko takie małe, nie wiem czy mnie słychać, czy mam podejść.
Teraz tutaj mamy mikrofon bezprzewodowy, mam nadzieję, że działa. Może to jeszcze pytanie jedno będzie do siebie, Miłosz.
Tak?
Pan co, jak się Pan przybliżył, to będzie prościej, zdaje się. Znaczy tu już Pana słychać.
Tak? Halo, halo, słychać? Halo?
No, tak.
Może nie.
Dzień dobry, ja mam tylko takie małe, drobne pytanie techniczne tak naprawdę, bo zainteresowała mnie ta akcja z pociągiem. Tam było chyba 20 kilka projekcji i kwestia taka techniczna, jak udało Wam się zsynchronizować 28 projekcji tak naprawdę. 21 właśnie są.
To szybko odpowiem po prostu na poziomie techniki. To wychodzi sygnał wychodzi z serwera, z Maca Pro, który ma 4 karty wideo. Te 4 karty wideo dają możliwość wypuszczenia 8 filmów wideo. Pierwszy jest użyty do monitora kontrolnego. Zostaje nam 7 sygnałów z programu Modulate, w którym odgrywany jest pasek wideo, który jest jednym tylko medium, jest jedno wideo, które ma długość 7 okien, więc 7 okien wchodzi z tego serwera, 7 liść, a teraz te 7 okien mogą być powtarzane w nieskończoność, dlatego że te 7 okien wchodzi z obrazu 360 stopni. Może być zwikany cylinder, a jak to rozłoży na płasko, to jego lewa strona doskonale łączy się z prawą, prawda? Więc wtedy można powtórzyć te 7 obrazów w nieskończoność. Zawsze będzie to obraz, który jest jednym prawem i doskonale łączy ze sobą. Rozumiem?
Dobra, jasne, wszystko fajnie, dzięki, rozumiem. Ja troszeczkę skróciłem, bo musimy przełączyć się już na Todorowa. Wielkie dzięki, Miłosz.
Jakby komuś interesowało...
Jakby kogoś interesowało, to ja przekierowuję na Twoją stronę, dlatego że większość tych projektów jest na Twojej stronie dostępnych, prawda? Zarówno zdjęcia, jak i nagrania wideo. Także...
A ja wracam do pracy nad projektem, który będzie grany po raz pierwszy za 2 tygodnie, który się nazywa Hamlet. Ja nie żyję, nie, ja żyję, a to wy jesteście martwi. Opera cyfrowa z muzyką.
Aha. No ja znam, mam nawet chyba film z tego fragmentu, prawda?
Z 8 procedurami wideo i całą publicznością totalnie zamówioną Imersji.
To damy znać i ja myślę, że jak będzie webcast może z premiery?
Tego nie wiem, ale jest to częścią Biennale Sztuki Cyfrowej w Paryżu, więc podejrzewam, że oni wszystko wypuszczają.
No to dobrze, Sprawdzimy w takim razie. Wielkie dzięki jeszcze raz, Miłosz. Wielkie dzięki. Rozłączamy się i próbujemy znaleźć Todorowa. O, jeszcze na Miłosz macha. Świetnie i odpłynął. Jest Todor. Jest Todor. Todorow, Bruksela. Nad ramiami. We're trying to catch up the timeline. Usually it's impossible. Hello, this is Todoroff. You know, so we are floating very quickly, immersively from Paris to Brussels. That's really great. How are you? You look great. You look really great. The same like in Moscow.
It was not so long time ago.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay, so what's up?
So, well, I will present my the same conference that I did in Moscow as you asked me, because I'm in a little bit of a rush because I have to rehearse amongst others the Polish piece for tonight's concert at 1:30 in another place.
Okay.
I am going to show the website where you can find most of the videos because I will have to shorten them. Okay. So you can. Sorry, I have to share my screen. Yeah. So you can find most of the videos under my website Todoroff.be, and you'll find some videos of video installations and works with dance and movies, some videos also of researchers. So if you want to see more than the small bits of video I'm showing, you can write.
Can you write your URL address on the chat window now?
Yes.
On the right side.
How can I do that?
On the upper right corner, you should have the small icon. When you move the cursor up to the right. Usually it's here.
Yeah.
No, I have nothing.
It's like a small.
Here, yes, right.
Okay. Macie Państwo teraz tutaj na dole. Zaraz się pokażę adres, pod który należy się udać, jeżeli się uda, ale jest napisane, że piszę w tym momencie, także okej. www.todoroff przez Valdes.be Belgium. Okay? So here you are, you have with all the materials, but he will just make a short presentation now. So okay, so let's share the video now.
Okay, so now I'm going to try to go a little bit fast with my presentation. So basically, the idea of using those sensors come from the idea of controlling and creating sound morphologies. Should I put my headphones?
Yes, but you have the title, yes, because he just skipped the title. He will talk about his sensor systems. That's very important. This is not really exactly connected with the immersions, but it is, in fact.
Because I heard quite a little echo. Is it better like this?
I can mute a little bit, but perhaps you don't need to hear us now. So just mute the sound and that will be okay.
Okay. Okay. So, and the fact that gesture has been historically very important, of course, with acoustical instruments, but also with the early beginnings of musique concrète, where the sounds were made using microphones, using sound bodies, and actually moving both the sound bodies and the microphones. And then when it went on to digital, actually a lot of this was lost because the computers couldn't handle it real time. So basically the idea is to reintroduce this kind of spontaneity, this kind of expressiveness that has gone in the early ages of digital tools. And it is using the concept of virtual instrument. Virtual instrument is actually some sound processing happening in the computer and sensors that are detecting movements by the performers, and there is a mapping that has to be made between both so that each element of gesture can control the right element of the sound. And this is something that can actually create different instruments depending on how you map the things. I'm going through this. Well, actually, the idea is that, for instance, with dancers, I started with a lot of different kinds of which were not worn on the body of the dancers, which were actually surface they were touching, or that was distance sensors like camera or ultrasound sensors. I don't think I have time to show those examples. The first time I really started to work for performances with inertial sensors like accelerometers, gyroscopes, was in the project Quartet by Margie Medlin. And the quartet was a robot, a musician, a real dancer, and a virtual dancer. We did use a lot of patches, like using cochlear type of filters in a configuration like a vocoder, using extraction of partial resynthesis, and all those were combined in a place where you could assign each sensor to each parameter with some kind of way of mapping where you can choose the sensor, where you choose what zone of the sensor you are using actually to I see the image is not what I'm showing.
I just open your website, so this is everything correct.
Okay, but I don't see the image I'm trying to comment.
No, you should start the video sharing. You didn't yet.
Oh!
Okay?
I'm very sorry.
Okay, so you go to conversation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, menu.
Oh, I did it, but I forgot to say start. Okay. Sorry. So basically, I was saying that the sensors could be used in this way in the patches, that one can choose the sensor, one can define the zone of the sensor that one finds useful to control a special parameter, and define the zone of the parameter one wants to control. There are various smoothing things and other. I was then going because the image was not going. So it was for this quartet project with a robot, a performer, a musician, a virtual dancer, and a real dancer. Well, there were, as you can see, there were many computers to make this run in those days. And I make a short, because that is not on my website. So this is a small example.
Well, the dancer controls the robot.
Here the dancers control the robot, and here the musician controls the virtual dancer.
We don't have the sound now from this.
How comes?
No? Do you hear it? Because
yes.
Very soft, but
maybe because you muted before.
I remove the headphone?
No, there's no sound. Okay.
Yes, you have sound?
Sometimes.
I'm sorry, it will be annoying. Okay, I try to
now something else.
I have to go through some steps. So the idea is to have virtual instruments which control many different parameters, and actually all of those parameters you define sensor as an input and define how to map it to the parameter. And the sensors were the following. We had on the left hand, left finger, accelerometers and gyroscopes. On the arm, there was a band sensor and even theremin built in on the violin. That were the sensors that were built. Those days, the gyroscopes were big. And the theremin that was built with an instrument maker fit pipe.
I will go to this. I use it also to control spatial adaptation of the 54 loudspeakers of the hall in the ZK element Karlsruhe. But I would like to show, and I sound will be there this time, how the same sensors are used to put on the upper arms of the dancer, controlling in this sequence all the music suggestions. Do you hear the sound?
Yes, yes, yes. That's okay.
Thanks. So we are actually using two features, the kind of static acceleration which depends on the inclination of the arm, and then the dynamic, the speed of rotations which are measured by the gyroscopes, are mapped to different sounds, controlling them, triggering them, controlling their frequency, etc. And to show how much actually the mapping has an influence, those are exactly the same sensors. You can see them here, but with different pattern sounds.
No sound. You can imagine.
Oh, you mean you have no sound?
No. Okay. Sometimes it's on, sometimes off.
Okay, well, so when it's quiet, you don't have anything. The video was controlled at the same time, and here it's compact mic from the speakers at the end of the speakers. So, this I will go through. Actually, we use the same sensors with Valdes, who has squaring sensor at her angles. And she's both controlling the sound and of her own acoustical instrument and triggering and controlling musical instruments. So, in this project, we did mapping tools with 1D, 3D, 2D's way of navigating to spaces of parameters that were useful, for instance, to do the transportations, reflecting on the needs, define precise intervals at different positions, rather than the continuum, etc. We also developed some tools that allowed us to recognize gestures by a technique which is called dynamic time warping, which allows for discrepancy between recorded gestures of library and the actual gestures, where some phases of the gesture would be slower or faster than the original and still be recognized. And I'm going to show this one, but then we developed new sensors that included also magnetometers. And we then get more data on each sensor node, the accelerometer, the magnetometer, and the gyroscope. And we could use this for instance, 20 flags. So that was a project where someone built this amplifier, which we actually explored then with the same alt violet and go a little bit further, where we combined the sensors with the analysis of the frequency and the level of the sound of the instrument. And some special notes bring twist patterns like this one. Well, you can see them on the website. Yes. And the interesting thing is when you have accelerometers, gyroscopes, and magnetometers, is that you can fuse it and actually get the attitude. That is the heading in space. And if you put several and you know the lengths of the arm, forearm, etc., you can actually build a system. So these are our sensors. I'll go a little bit forward. So you see the master one with the battery and the Wi-Fi transmitter. And those are the nodes that are connected with a digital network on the body to the main node. Sorry. Each node one can add parameters. So, for instance, Alexander Schubert used that 30 with drum. And here we can see actually all the values moving in real time and how the orientation can be extracted. And the skeleton, one sees the orientation of each of the three nodes here and reconstruct the skeleton. This was used in a piece, but I had time to show it. This this shows a little bit the mapping of the team, how it can be actually mapped in the space of entities. You can see the video on my website. And here is like a fusion between the sensor, the thick skeleton on the image, and the skeleton extracted by the Kinect, where I hooked an arm to the skeleton of the Kinect. Actually, both have advantages. Sensors are a little bit cumbersome of the body, but actually they react very fast. Every 10 seconds per the vacuum, which is much faster than the action of the Kinect. It's also much more stable. But if you need to have the full expression of the body, you put a lot of sensors on to get it to the sensors. So it's interesting. The elements of the body that are moving fast, like hands, arms, and the Kinect for the body. And I would like to just a small extract of Evanescence, a project I did with a cellist who's from the Spencer, Pigit van den Bogarde, and with live electroacoustic and live video with Max Jit from L'Oratoire Melares Guerra. I put a sheet like I will actually end here because I have to think while someone is calling me from this. Sorry, it might be.
You must go. I know. Any questions? We have the website of Todoroff available. All those projects are there also, so we can continue exploration. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice end of conference. And nice concerts tonight.
Thank you very much.
We will
see you on the concert. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
No to proszę Państwa, mamy następną osobę opóźnioną w pół godziny ponad. Mauricio, are you ready?
Yes.
I think we are closing now the chat here. I have it. Były pytania, dlatego chciałem. Proszę Państwa, zanim zaczniemy, to przypominam tylko tak, zgodnie z ogłoszeniem. System wirtualnej rzeczywistości jest gotowy w foyer. Maciek Balczak, Grażyna Balczak są tam. Ja wiem, że to jest jakaś sprzeczność, prawda, tutaj prezentacja, ja proszę Państwa tam, ale przypominam tylko, że ten system jest do wieczora czynny, także jak będziecie Państwo na przykład musieli wyjść, to warto tam też zaglądnąć. Rzeczywiście ogólnie dostęp do tych systemów nie jest tak prosty, nie jest tak łatwy, jest ograniczony, a zostały przywiezione specjalnie dla nas z Łodzi. I one się wiążą no, już bezpośrednio z tematem naszej konferencji. Natomiast ten wykład, który teraz zaczynamy, jest szczególnym przykładem też graniczącym. So we are talking about ultrasonic speakers, the technology which got us again to the edge of our sensors, especially of our perception, because usually we are surrounded by the sound and we are recognized or not, but we are more familiar with. But you will talk about the concept. And then what is quite important, Maurizio is with us in 3 times. That's a presentation, then the piece of you will be performed on the concert at evening, and then also on Monday, which is quite important, we have an extended workshop by Maurizio at the studio at 12 o'clock, just to be, because I think the third one was not so clear, indicated earlier, then we decided to make it so just as a reminder, that three terms. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks for the invitation. So yeah, I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. I know we're a bit behind the schedule. And I came to talk about directional speakers. I don't know how many of you have had any experience with them. So I'm going to just try to give a little bit of background of what it is inside and what are those speakers and what they are useful for. And pretty much I'm going to concentrate on my experience with them because I'm not a engineer. I have a very little understanding of what they do in the physical terms, but I know how to build them. I learned how to do it when I came. Well, first of all, I need to talk about my background. I'm a composer, I'm a musician, and I started doing electroacoustic music since mid-90s, and I got, like many composers of my generation, have a lot of interest in technology, but very little understanding of it. So I had an education of composition, classical composition, but little by little I started to get more and more involved into technology, and I ended up working for an institution that does research in Slovenia that's called Ultrasonic Audio, that started in 2006, and I joined the company in 2008 when we started to experiment with these devices that are based on ultrasonic piezoelectric sensors. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They are the ones that you have in the car when you're parking, and they have this beeping. They send a very high frequency to feedback the object that is near to them, and then they respond and they can calculate how far they are. So what we were doing back then is to go here because the noise is a little bit. And Genesis is right here. So this was the first speaker that we developed. It was called AccuSpace, and it was an array of 110 transducers of 16 millimeters. All of them were having a central frequency of 40,000 hertz. And this was a Class A amplifier that turned out to be a big fail because they were heating up really fast, and the amplitude was dropping after 45 minutes of usage. But this was the first model that we tried to put on market, and we sold them in a few universities. I'm also trying to limit it, since we have a little time, to 3 examples of their usage, or the 3 examples in which I've been interested on. One is sonic or sound art, the other one is for creative marketing, and the third one is musical interfaces. We try to build, I'll talk a little bit about that later, but we try to build one Syntact, it's called. It's an interface that has the same amount of transducers, but instead of being disposed in a flat surface, they're disposed in a concave shape. So they have a focal point, and then you have the tactile response in your hand, and we had some, I'll talk about that later. So yeah, this was the first model. It's a very beautiful transducers because they were open. They had this, the ones that you see in the car, they have a flat surface. You don't see actually the cone, the crystal is exposed here, the horn of each one of them. And this was the second generation of amplifiers. It's a Class D amplifier that it reduced a lot of the noise, and it was more stable and more power efficient. So we started building these for the second generation of the speaker, which was a commercial device. This is from the view from above. This is a render of the housing that we try to do in the third generation. But building this amplifier cost us 75,000 euros, which emptied the company, and we sold only 10 of them. These speakers were very expensive to produce, very expensive to create. Every model was too difficult. So at the end, I went back on my own. I split up with the company in 2012, and I started to make my own experiments, not for commercial output. I started to believe they had no commercial. These speakers have been in the market since 1997, 1998, and nobody's using them. Nobody's using them. Everybody's fascinated about the fact that the sound can get condensed in one direction, and so for some reason, nobody has had a real scaled application. But I won't talk about my perception of why do I believe they don't have it. They don't have this commercial output. But I do believe they have an interesting artistical appliances, and they can be very useful in controlled acoustic environments. But they definitely are not ready to be on a company. That's my belief. We're fantasizing about having these kind of devices that has a camera or an analysis in the middle, so it can detect the face and it direct to your face, so it's more efficient. But again, most of the energy of this device was, we never really built it. This is a render, of course. But the problem with this is the sound travels in the air, and it uses the non-linearity of the air, so the audio can get demodulated, because actually it's carried by a 40,000 hertz frequency, so it's unaudible. But the audio gets demodulated, and then when it bounces, when it bounces, it starts to become audible. So that's a very nice effect when it hits your head, because it feels like somebody's speaking inside your skull. And this is what it can be very attractive. So we did this model, and the housing had less transducers. This is the render of how it was made. It had a mesh on top. It was more classic, and it was easier to. The original one was very beautiful to see, but again, it was not a speaker, so we wanted to do it a bit more classical. And this is the origin of it. So after that, we went to a phase of a very creative part of what will be the final design. And this is the first time we used them in live. As you can see, it's very ugly. Now, when it's a render, it looks very nice, but then in reality, it was a very not so nice looking device. But we use this for a cultural center in Oaxaca, Mexico, in the southwest of the country. We built 11 of them, and this was in a cultural center that was going to be open in 2011. And they wanted to have 11 of them around the space. I will show you a video so you can see and hear a little bit of the acoustic environment and how does this affect so much in the quality of the sound that it makes them useless in a place on which you cannot have a controlled acoustic. This was like everywhere else in Mexico, it was very noisy. It was in the streets, it had 2 avenues around, and people always talks a lot, so there's too much fuss, and it was difficult to understand what was going on. So, although the convent is beautiful, it was a rebuilt convent. We had a few of them here in this part, a few of them here down, and 2 of them facing to this obsidian fountain in the middle, which was really nice because when you were getting close to this object, it's kind of a sculpture, but it's in the floor, When you get close to it, the sound rebounds to you, and this was the only one that I really, really liked among the 11 of them. By the way, I was supposed to have this one. Wow. Oh yeah, this is an here. This is an example of how does the environment sound and where and how can you hear it when you get close. Of course, it's good with a camera of a cell phone, so it's not very good quality. This is the natural sound of the space. Then the sound disappears. So it's only on this area where you can hear the sound. So there are two pieces, very easy to do in space, and both of them have their own area of sound. And this is inside the context, inside of one of the galleries.
It's better like this.
So in this sense, it's very practical use, because you can create many acoustic spaces in one acoustic space, or in a third acoustic space. But it's difficult if you're a little bit outside of the beam of sound, then it's unaudible. And then you have a lot of problems, because if you dispose it like this, and you're in Mexico, the average height of Mexican people is between 150 and 180. This is the normal height of people, men and women, even smaller. But it's not so easy. Then you have to put them on top. So you can have them as a shower, semi-tall disposed. And then you don't have to deal with the height of people, because if one person that is 2 meters tall comes to this, has to hunch a little bit in order to hear it. So that's another problem that you can have with it. This one, it's I just performed this 2 days ago in Belgium, and it's only noise. I will show you the sound, the original sound of the piece. This was for an Indonesian artist who asked me to make her a piece with one of my speakers, and I came up with this. This is semi-tall disposed. Let me see if I can. I'll play you just the sample of it. It's a noise. It's a very. The concept of the exhibition was quite brutal. It's about a cave that they found in Indonesia, where they have 1965. They have a massive killing during the Civil War. They just found the bodies of hundreds of thousands of people in this cave. So she wanted to represent that, and in the wall they had only ears made out of ceramics. So what I did was just a sound. It's a loop that lasts for a minute or so, but this is the quality of the original sound. This is her voice whispering. That's pretty much it. But the way that it sounds in the camera, this is getting into the hole. There's a footprint, so you know there's something going on in that part. But you can hear the carrier frequency, octave down. It's super high here. If you play this with the higher higher frequency response speakers, this is impossible to hear. And these are the ears that were replaced, but when you come, the carrier is everywhere in the room. It makes it very annoying, but it was part of the idea of the installation. But look how much of the sound gets lost. This is the sample that I was just playing. Basically, you just hear. Of course, it's the microphone of the cell phone, but as well, you have the same problem. It's annoying, huh? Okay, so the third, this speaker that I placed in Belgium has a microcomputer, because it was very, as I explained, it was very difficult and expensive to develop the amplifiers.
I decided to try to use the microcomputers, the Linux microcomputers of BeagleBone Black and Raspberry Pi. The BeagleBone Black had the advantage of having this audio cave that has an input and output, and it can have a sampling resolution of 90,000, which makes possible to have the amplitude modulation that I needed in order to create the effect of for the speaker. But it was very slow, it's not effective enough, and you have problems with phases, so it was not useful. So again, I had to end up doing the amplitude modulation with circuits, which of course increased the cost of the speaker. But it was more effective to use them as part of the next model I tried to build was with Sound Laser, which is an American company that makes the amplifier, and the Raspberry Pi combined. The Raspberry Pi has the advantage of having an HDMI output, so you can have video reproduction, which is very handy as well. And everything is built in one housing. So, and also you can have a playlist administrator, and you can have online access to this playlist, so you can add or remove files. You can also have controllers, motors, everything you can connect to a microcomputer with these pins. It's part of the system now. So the next model, it was built with 2 panels and one middle sensor that triggers can be used as one element of interaction. So everything is in the same housing. The amplifier, the Raspberry Pi, the 2 panels, which is more effective for the head, because the other models that I was showing you have the problem that they only send the information, sends the sound to the face, and most of the energy gets lost in the face. So it doesn't even have the length or the distance between the human ears, or the average human ears. So you only hear normally with one ear. In this case, of course, it's still mono, because it doesn't make any sense to have stereo when you have such a frontal, you cannot have the depth image. So it's only mono, but you have 2 panels, one of them ideally will hit your ears. And it has another Wi-Fi and Bluetooth dongle that allows you to send wirelessly sound and also administrate the device remotely, which was very handy for other applications that I will talk a little bit. This is the housing, the last housing we had. I really like it. It was designed by a Slovenian furniture designer, and we produced 10 of them, and I use them for pieces only now, for these kind of projects. So now I'll talk a little about the sound and musical interface that we developed. This is the syntax. As I said, it's the same kind of distribution of transducers, but this is in a concave shape. So it has a camera that analyzes your hand, and you can. We made a software. It's called Hand in a Box, or band, I don't remember. It was in 2011. We dropped it, but it was the only thing that I kept was the software, because it can really describe the idea. I will show you the video. Do I have time to show another video?
Yeah.
How much time do I have left? How much time do I have left?
Well, still, we have some time. Yeah. We are delayed, so that's...
Okay. This, you will see how the sound behaves, and we have this liquid nitrogen that it can show you, that it can show the energy, how the energy converges to one point. Yeah? You can see the periods, no? They're so short, and you can see them. And this was a promotional video that we made for when we thought about doing it, commercial. The original music was horrible, so I had to put on.
Syntax is a new instrument for musical expression, and it provides non-contact tactile feedback by focusing acoustic energy. It It has a spherically shaped array of 120 ultrasonic transducers, all oriented towards a focal point where the sound becomes tangible. A built-in camera is used for analyzing motion and shape of the performer's hand. Syntact's band-in-a-hand software solution is an example of live image descriptor organization and mapping, which allows playful generation of meaningful and diverse musical structures. With different hand gestures, the performer can reorganize a musical score in real time and trigger different instruments which generate output according to the pitch and time information contained in the MIDI file. Is introducing a new paradigm in the field.
The rest is just a bunch of fake words that means nothing. It's basically what you see, it's useless. This is like many other companies' projects. All we were trying to do was to create meaningless information for the hand, but the tactile response that you get is zero. What you saw in the liquid nitrogen reaction is something that is unperceptive for human hand. This project lasts for 4 years, and it's all fake. I was not involved in that part because that was the company's project, but I was a part. My work here was to do the software with the computer vision development. But I was really against it because people who was trying this were having the illusion that they were having some tactile response, but it was zero. It's less than what if you put your hand here. So this is one of the problems that I started to get distance. I'm mentioning it because it was one of the attempts, and I dedicated 2 years to develop the software with a company, and it was useless. Another application that is not so successful, but it's been trying since the origin of these speakers, is the creative publicity. Many companies, not only the one we're trying to build in Slovenia, but this one in Mexico also thought this was, Imersja Electronics was an attempt of doing creative publicity on malls and supermarkets to put these speakers to promote. This was not the first time this has been tried from many other companies, but it was an interesting approach because we wanted to do it not only on commercial spaces but also in casinos. So we went to Las Vegas to try them out, and it was a very interesting idea to have them on gaming machines, to put them and send information there. We learned a lot about the limits of the amount of transducers that you can use in order to have a perceptive effect. And this was the smallest amount of transducers that we could achieve. But we put them in 2 panels of the gaming devices. But at the end, it also, I dropped it, and the other companies who were trying to chase this also find that it was very difficult because of the same problem of acoustic pollution inside of a casino. Is not, it doesn't make much sense. And this is where it comes a little bit to what the festival or the conference is about immersion. One of the things after, this is from 2008 till 2013-14. And of course the pieces that I've been doing afterwards. But from now on, I'm going to start working in Novars with Ricardo Clement for research of what to do with these speakers and what they can be applied for something more creative than just marketing or this musical interface. So what I will, is this, is there any video here? No. One of the things that I would like to do during the residency is to make pieces that have, I don't know if you're familiar with this concept ASMR. I'll talk about this at the very end. But it's an acoustic sensory response analysis for voice and binaural sounds. And I like to experiment with this in a few pieces that I've been trying to work with a performer friend of mine who does this on video blogs. And she basically has a binaural microphone, and she's just reading sounds, and people's having this tingling response in their face that somehow get used to it, and it has a very therapeutical, I really don't know the background research of it, but she explained it, and it was very interesting. So it's something that I would like to try to connect with some of the techniques of audio therapy that I know in order to have pieces on public spaces like concerts that you project the video or the person performs live, and then you have a big screen if it's a video, and a lot of conventional speakers in combination with directional sound in order to describe trajectories of sound, held between conventional speakers and directional in between to complete the trajectories. Of course, with ambisonic, in combination with ambisonic. The second experiment I want to do is, one of the problems that they have is that they have a very high, mid-high frequency response. So you cannot have frequencies below 250, 300 hertz, depends on the transducers you're using. So this generates a very thin perception of sound, even when the sound is loud enough, because the carrier frequency is 120 dBs. And this is one of the big downsides of this technology, is that it can be very harmful for your hearing. So if you get exposed to this speaker for more than, let's say, 2 hours, you can get a tinnitus that is irreversible, because you cannot hear that 40,000 hertz frequencies in such a high energy. Your brain knows it and you have this reflex, but if you stay there for a long time, you can really create this acoustic trauma of the inner ear of a person. So this is obviously a healthy issue, but it hasn't been researched. I've been trying to find any medical researchers who have been studying this, and there's just one study that I found in England about it. But okay, moving this away and trying to think about getting exposed for a short period of time, one of the solutions is to have these bass shakers to compensate the lack of low frequency, because otherwise, if you put a subwoofer, many companies, one in England has these panels that use a different technology that is not piezoelectric transducers, but they have electrostatic membranes. And when you have this, this company has an output for putting a subwoofer. And this subwoofer kills the effect of directionability because the sound becomes omnipresent. So one of the solutions that I want to try is to have these shakers attached to furniture. So you're sitting in a chair, the bass frequency gets feel or sensed by bone transmission. The other one is to put them on small drones that generate very little sound, noise, and to put them to fly and have pieces of few of them with small transducers, the ones that we're using in casinos. These kind of PCBs can be very light, and it can receive the audio and get the amplitude modulation inside the flying object. And this is the ASMR. This is one of the pieces that we would like to do. I'll play just a tiny version of it. This is kind of a joke, but it can be serious as well. So she does this thing online as considered to be therapeutical.
It's nice to see you again. Thank you so much for joining.
And there's hundreds of thousands of people linked to this stuff. I don't know why. But she gets millions of views per day.
Different techniques that are pretty well known to hopefully relax you.
She gives this very long introduction about what she does and what you're supposed to experience. But when you have headphones and you just play the game, you really get into this angling effect in your face. This is the thing that I found interesting. To make pieces, this is not a case, this is her own thing. But just to combine this kind of effect when you get immersed into what she's doing, when you play the role that she's asking you to play with, then it gets very interesting.
Aspirations and thoughts your way. Then online tools use therapy or color therapy.
There's a lot of studies about the way that they have to modulate the voice and they have to whisper in others. It reminds me when I was reading the theory behind it, It reminds me of this effect that for me, everybody's supposed to have one point on which the sound makes you feel safe in your childhood or when you're a baby. But for me, it was with one teacher in elementary school that she was coming to tell the stories, and I remember exactly the same feeling in the face when I hear this sound. Somehow you just forget about what he's saying, and you just concentrate on the contour of the voice. And it doesn't matter what the words are saying, but how it's starting to become in another direction of perception. But this is 45 minutes long, and she has videos like this, tons of them. And I also do it with a friend of mine who's a Russian performer in Mexico City, and she also does the movie, also very long. I think it's good time for questions. I spoke a lot, and do you have anything that you would like to add? I think I spoke for like 25 minutes, and it was supposed to be 20.
So the question is how much the page you are showing is coming to our art concept, especially the advanced contemporary concept, because part of them is dedicated to appear on the commercial market, and how much we consider to be used either specifically dedicated to the art or specific, in general, because we know this. We were also making the workshop last year. Presenting.
Can I help just a bit the conversation so that because I did a similar process, no? Yeah. So I would like really to share a similar process in the sense of being inspired by industry to really take clear concepts of immersiveness and obviously artistically, I would say, very rich of references. You can imagine, I mean, Marek was already going through a long history of from acousmatic to situationistic approaches where obviously immersiveness is already the space of reality you are facing. But going through your industrial process, and that it's obviously from a different angle similar to what I did in Pro Audio, I would like to answer Marek. You cannot think that only the art event is the moment where you can experience immersiveness, first. Second, it's not possible to think that only a traditional, for example, sound system in a theater, no matter acousmatic or not, is the ideal architecture for an immersive experience. So I don't know if this was driving you, but when I entered the pro audio industry heavily, it means really heavy pro audio industry in the States and in Europe, and I did a 10 years project as an industrial developer and as a manager, I realized that the space for intensive, multisensorial, immersive design was there as a real chance, not only for me as an investor and designer, but also for students, for people that could apply their ideas, not only in a theater, but in the huge scale of architecture and space development. So on one side, it's clear that you can see that the result is an industrial product, but it's not the right lenses to use. It's a tool to transform and transfigure dynamically and pragmatically and practically the reality of experience, of the daily experience of media. Yeah. So this is something in the art world very often you don't realize that there's another world, the daily basis one, that really requires a completely different kind of architecture and media architecture and technology. Otherwise, you don't enter.
Right.
I mean, you don't enter.
No, in this case, the problem, I understand perfectly what you're saying, but the thing with the artistic output was actually the only reason why I got involved in the first place.
Yeah, that's okay.
And that the industrial part was a way to pay for it. But then when we got into the point in which we had to pitch this product and go to conference or go into this business accelerator symposiums, you realize that this is useless. Because you hit the wall and they only want things that are scalable immediately. Like all the investors that want to go into this kind of angel investment, they just want to think how much they're going to profit for the least amount of money. And in this case, producing one of these speakers, the last process on which we were, just to produce one of the speakers was 75,000 euros, just the amplifier.
I know.
And the whole thing was 300,000 euros, and each speaker you had to sell for more than 1,000 euros. Who was going to buy this?
Also because, you know, in line array, I mean, guys, there's so much technology in this field, you cannot imagine. No, I consult several companies, and there are companies that are doing line arrays highly directional, no, even with rotating head. So you can even, no, in real time, what you were designing is already existing in K-Array.
Of course,
it's an Italian company. They just, and you can add software. They want to, I mean, they say they want to add software to detect environmental conditions and accordingly moving the speaker, blah blah. Whatever. At the end of the day, they sell speakers.
And it's very expensive. And it's very expensive to produce.
But the thing is, as a designer, as a young musician, you need to investigate reality that is also outside of the theater. I mean, you can develop any sensing strategy, input strategy, but at the end of the day, okay, you can have a theater, they hire you, you do a nice design, that's it. That was okay for the previous generations. But for the future, I can imagine you need to diversify the possibilities, to be a professional in the ultra-media, intermedia, post-media world. How you face this? You need to analyze how reality is becoming a mixed reality. So in a way, what we did, a bit naive, because I think you were naive as I was naive entering the industry, we tried to see the naked king. The naked king is a reality where the difference between, let's say, the symbolic world and the real world is no more there. Because virtual reality, the distinction between the theater and the residential building is no more there.
Right.
But the consistency, the material consistency, you need to be a very good industrial developer. Otherwise, the product will fail. Right. After 2 months, it's over.
No, and I'm not aiming to that. At the end, it became a hobby, to be honest. It became a hobby. Right. It's one of the things that I enjoy doing in my basement and connecting things because, like I said, it's more experimental. I just go and try. Now I'm designing one that instead of having the transducers in a solid PCB with the same principle that we had in Syntac, but just having more membrane that can be bent. Then you can imagine to predict not only the direction of the sound, but how long the sound will be, because then you have a constant dispersion of each one of the transducers. And these kind of things is what I find very entertaining.
I think that's a very important point now. We have what I announced already, we have the meeting with you on Monday. Lorenzo is also in Krakow. So that would be like, I propose to continue the discussion. I know that's not all of you, but that would be the best, concerning our schedule, because we are a little bit in trouble. So
if you have any questions, this is my mail, but you wanted to ask me something? Sorry,
yes, I wanted to ask just a simple question, how heavy it is.
How heavy?
Yeah.
The lightest one we produce for the casinos is no more than 100 grams.
No, healthy. I mean,
healthy, not healthy at all.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
No, yeah,
you have to be up to 10 minutes exposed to this. Otherwise, ultrasound is it's 120 dBs of carrier frequency.
How much there is options to develop the healthy way of sound projecting with this device?
It's, with this acoustic principle, no, because the way for sound to travel, the physics of it has to be in a very strong pressure, sound pressure. So it's a lot of amplitude. Even if you have a big, these are 16 millimeters transducers. But even if you make, for instance, these ones that are using in the army in the United States now, they're even using it against the civil public.
No, it's a weapon.
It's a weapon, yeah. But when you have a lot of energy, you can produce not only physical, unpleasant effect, you can actually make someone fall, or you can make you can even make them crap on their pants.
Yeah, but my question is further in further way. I wanted to ask if there is any possibility to design a 3D sound projector, so you can work with sound as like with a 3D printer.
You mean represent the sound by different?
Yes, you said that you have only mono sound, and this doesn't matter if you use stereo or mono.
When you have it like this, yes, because there's no this 16 milliseconds difference between, you know, the stereo effect has this difference of
right. But I was like, it was just the thought. If there is any possibility to make it first of all healthy for longer stay in the sound, and to project sound in the space, like to point certain sound in a certain point in space using this device.
I know what you mean. We can, there's one guy in DX Arts in Seattle, in Washington State University, who's doing exactly that, Stampin.
So you can walk through the hole and see different...
And then you have different movements in each one of the channels. The problem that you have with this one is the phases, that you have to correct phases. Each one of the transducers should have a different channel. So in this case, you will need 120 channels audio card. But DXArt has this infrastructure. I don't. But he's actually calculating how much the phase of a phase, redundantly, has to be happen in order to come to this what you're saying. That
so in the one line you can have a lot of sound, but they are stable. And you can move through between them.
Exactly. But it's super expensive. At this point, but let me close because I think now we're...
I want to make a...
Is there any strategy?
Anyway.
No, I think we can have questions later.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a luxury to come and talk about hobbies and not music. Expensive hobby. Can I unplug this? And the audio? Okay.
So the next speaker is Dariusz Mazurowski z Gdańska. Gdzieś dostajesz tutaj, czy się przełączysz?
Nie, wiesz, ja się tylko podłączyłem, bo mi bateria padała.
Aha.
I always lose conscious with how long I was
No, but I didn't realize yesterday that you went through similar experience as I did.
But anyway, I developed some magic.
No ja się postaram w miarę szybko, może uda mi się trochę tego czasu nadrobić. Przygotowałem taki temat głośnik środowiska akustyczne jako instrument oraz sposób dyfuzji dźwięku. My jesteśmy w określonej przestrzeni akustycznej, którą tworzy ta sala. Dysponujemy głośnikami, dzięki którym możemy dokonać emisji zdarzenia dźwiękowego, czy to utworu muzycznego, czy też jakiejkolwiek innej formy. Ja mógłbym, to jest trochę plagiat, ponieważ słyszałem to pytanie na pewnej konferencji naukowej w Toronto, ale mógłbym teraz zadać pytanie, ile na tej sali znajduje się głośników. I
jak dobrze zapytasz, to może sam głośnik Ci
odpowie. No więc właśnie, bo oczywiście patrzymy, że są 4 głośniki, ale każdy z nas ma w kieszeni to. Te komputery też mają jakieś, także tak naprawdę jesteśmy tymi głośnikami otoczeni, albo zanurzeni w przestrzeni, w której znajdują się te głośniki. Ja może zacznę od końca, czy od momentu, do którego wrócę, modyfikując przestrzeń akustyczną, w której się znajdujemy i wykorzystując system głośników, jesteśmy w stanie stworzyć pewne, ja nie chcę powiedzieć iluzje, ale pewne różnego rodzaju sytuacje akustyczne, zdarzenia akustyczne przez choćby bardzo proste elementy. Gdybyśmy na przykład w tej chwili te głośniki odwrócili w kierunku ściany, efekt akustyczny byłby zupełnie inny. Zupełnie inny byłby, gdybyśmy je przenieśli w inne miejsce. Ale ja sobie pozwolę teraz na trochę taki mały rys historyczny, mianowicie wiedza na temat samego dźwięku, jak również i przestrzeni, w których ten dźwięk się rozchodzi, jest wbrew pozorom bardzo stara i tak naprawdę była przedmiotem badań już od wielu wieków. To, co w tej chwili widać na ekranie, to jest szalenie interesująca praca, którą nawet zresztą można gdzieś w jakichś bibliotekach znaleźć, nawet nie wiem, czy ona nie została zdigitalizowana. To jest autorstwa Vitruviusza, czyli Marcusa Vitruviusa Polio. To jest rzymski architekt, który mniej więcej około XX, czy między XX a X wiekiem przed naszą erą napisał taką fundamentalną pracę na temat architektury. Jest to De Architektura, to jest wielotomowa księga, ona się zachowała do dnia dzisiejszego, niestety bez ilustracji. Ta ilustracja, którą widać w tej chwili na ekranie, to jest próba współczesnego, znaczy nie współczesnego, to jest próba gdzieś tam odtworzenia jednej z ilustracji, które towarzyszyły tej księdze. Natomiast Vitruvius zajmował się właśnie kwestią rozchodzenia się dźwięku, przy czym on traktował dźwięk jako falę, jako zjawisko falowe, drgania, które można w różny sposób zakłócać, które podlegają odbiciom itd., itd. Również nasza starożytna wiedza na temat dźwięku wywodziła się z prac Pitagorasa z VI wieku przed naszą erą, czy Arystotelesa z IV wieku. I generalnie ta wiedza była bardzo rozległa, oczywiście wtedy nie dysponowano środkami elektroakustycznymi i musiano wszelkiego rodzaju zjawiska i zdarzenia kreować w sposób bardzo tradycyjny. Natomiast ja chcę powiedzieć, że ta wiedza pozwoliła na stworzenie wielu bardzo ciekawych miejsc. Ja tylko pozwolę sobie wymienić kilka takich przykładów. Tutaj mam na przykład amfiteatr w Orange, to jest amfiteatr w Atenach u stóp Akropolu. Natomiast to jest szalenie ciekawe miejsce, nie wiem, czy ktoś z obecnych był na Malcie. To jest tak zwana komnata wyroczni. Właściwie niewiele wiadomo na temat budowniczych, którzy to stworzyli. Niższe głosy, czyli dźwięki niskotonowe, średniotonowe powodują echo w tym pomieszczeniu, natomiast dźwięki wyższe tego echa nie powodują. I trudno być, to pomieszczenie prawdopodobnie zostało zbudowane z myślą o jakichś rytuałach, jakichś obrzędach i najprawdopodobniej te specyficzne własności akustyczne tego pomieszczenia są celowe, co świadczy o dość dużej wiedzy tych, którzy go zbudowali. Także słynny kompleks Taj Mahal, który charakteryzuje się bardzo specyficznym, bardzo długim pogłosem, który wykorzystywano w wielu nagraniach także współczesnych. Także jest bardzo wiele takich szalenie interesujących miejsc, które mają bardzo specyficzną akustykę, która została uzyskana w sposób celowy, zamierzony. Czasy troszeczkę bardziej nam współczesne, XIX wiek, to jest telefon Bella i tak naprawdę telefon to właściwie jest też pierwszy przykład takiego komercyjnego zastosowania głośnika, czyli tego, do czego dojdziemy. Natomiast ja chcę jeszcze powiedzieć rzecz również taką ciekawą, że w bardzo wielu kulturach Mamy również interesujące metody modyfikacji dźwięku naturalne, które być może zostały odkryte trochę przez przypadek. Ja tutaj pozwolę sobie przytoczyć taki jeden tylko przykład. To są niektóre plemiona Indian, które zamieszkują szczególnie te północne, bardzo dalekie północne rejony, dalekiej północy mieszkają przecież Eskimosi. Mają taki szczególny charakter niektóre z tych tradycyjnych wykonań muzyki, a mianowicie śpiewają do garnków. Prawdopodobnie zostało to wymyślone, ponieważ żeby po prostu nie tracić ciepła, tak, żeby nie przeziębić strun głosowych gardła. A przy okazji odkryto, że to powoduje, w zależności od zastosowania różnego kształtu, różnej wielkości naczyń, również różne modyfikacje tego głosu. I zostało to w sposób twórczy w tej tradycyjnej muzyce tych plemion czy Eskimosów wykorzystane. Ja nie będę może tutaj